Here we go again. Denise's shaken state worried him, not just because of the tension between them when they parted ways a few days ago, but the speed at which her car took off into 3rd Street's
Oh my god. Okay.
And I'm back. Welcome. If you've been watching since the beginning, welcome back to my channel and thank you for being so loyal. I am Dina Haynes and I am reading my book Neesa, contemporary romance book, the first reality book series that I've ever heard of. If you're new to the channel, you found yourself in the middle of my book. We're now going into chapter 18. So I would recommend that you go back to the beginning. There's a link in the video as well as in the description below, and watch chapters 1 through 17 because I'm about to drop some spoilers. Oh my god. Chapter 17 was pretty intense. Neesa went on a date with David. Well, first we got to meet Denise's mom, and we see that she's kind of a spiritual character, and she's definitely on Team Ben. Everybody seems to be on Team Ben. And we kind of find out why once Denise goes on that date with David. It's pretty much a disaster. Oh my God. I felt for her in that scene. It was kind of creepy and scary, you know, because he's bringing up stuff from her past that she clearly wants to leave there. And the actors on the inside, they just feel like normal people. So when you have someone coming at you, fangirling on you, it's strange. I have a little experience with that. I moved to LA to become an actor, to pursue acting, and obviously took a hard left. But I remember doing a film and having to do a showing, and people just staring at me because they'd watched the film, and then they come to the opening and I guess they're trying to pick out, you know, who are the actors in the film, and people were just staring at me and felt like knowing me without knowing me. You know, they look at you like, oh, I know who that person is, and you're thinking, I have no idea who these people are. So it's very unnerving, and I kind of wanted to put that sensation in this book with Neesa. Now that she's a real estate agent, she's like, she hopes she could just erase all of that happened. You'd think she could go back to a normal life, and then here comes this fan recognizing her without her costume on and snuck in a date with her. So anyways, she put the kibosh on that. But it's over and she's relieved. So let's move on to chapter 18 and find out what happens next. Chapter 18, Reuben's perspective. Note to self, don't make Denise angry. Reuben admired her right hook and was in fact a little jealous he couldn't get a lick in himself. He had parked on a side street across the way and gave a little fist bump while sitting behind the darkened windows of his SUV. It was a bittersweet victory, celebrating what must have been a disastrous date for Denise. Maybe now she could see David for the snake he was, without Reuben having to explain the whole truth of their relationship. He still wrestled with a bit of guilt over the lie by omission. Denise's shaken state worried him, not just because of the tension between them when they parted ways a few days ago, but the speed at which her car took off into 3rd Street's heavy traffic. He stayed put, watching his old client chew on his girl's hot handiwork. Man, she was a piece of work. The way she stood up for herself. He had half a mind to run after her so they could both put a cap on this chapter and celebrate the beginning of their story. Instead, he watched as the valet brought Jeff's car forward and opened the door for him. Jeff stood where Denise had left him, staring off in Reuben's direction. The attendant jogged up to Jeff and gestured for his attention. After a beat, he shoved a few bills into the guy's hand and stepped off the curb, his eyes still trained on Reuben's car. Reuben smiled. Yeah, Dick, look who's here. I see you. Jeff's gaze lingered as he walked all the way around to the open driver's side door and sat down. Reuben narrowed his eyes. Jeff couldn't know definitively if it was his SUV or him sitting behind the wheel, yet he definitely sensed a challenge brewing, and he couldn't let it go. He would keep pursuing Jeff until the man's interest in Denise stopped. Reuben owed her that much. Reuben steered his SUV onto 3rd Street, staying a few cars behind Jeff with the intention of following him home. He had to be sure the guy wouldn't retaliate against Denise. Calabasas was a good 30 minutes from West Hollywood. Reuben welcomed the distraction to keep his itchy fingers from texting Denise, especially since she'd cut all communication the past few days. He hoped it wasn't his fault, that he hadn't been the cause of her postcoital depression on their otherwise perfect first date. At the time, he hadn't asked her about it, since he tended to avoid inquiring too deeply about a girl he was sharing a bed with. But this thing with Denise was heating up, at least on his end. He understood her caution now. Their harmless night together had complicated things more than it solved them. Someone once told him that relationships required disclosure, transparency. He'd given it to her in spades, even though it went against everything he stood for. And yet she'd ended their first night in tears. He'd spent the past few days working out why Denise couldn't trust him, and concluded that it was all that talk about the scores of women he'd dated. Seemed there was a delicate balance between full disclosure and too much honesty. Couldn't she cut him some slack due to his lack of experience? Or maybe it was the sex. She declared she wouldn't have sex on the first date, but could he have somehow pressured her into going to bed with him? Sure, he came on strong in the car, but she was the one driving at breakneck speed to get them to her house. Those were her scratch marks on his ass. He'd fretted over the details a million times and was still unsure if he'd done right by her. Hopefully she would begin answering his calls and texts again now that Jeff had clearly sabotaged his one chance with her. 2 cars ahead, Jeff switched to the next lane and Reuben moved over when it was clear. He focused on the movement of the cars ahead, but his mind kept prodding at the sore spot in his heart. He needed to hear Denise's voice, needed to make sure she was all right and maybe find out what had happened. The facts weren't important. It was more about her reassuring him that they were okay. More than a half hour later, he followed the dark blue Audi off the ramp of the 101 and reduced his speed, falling back to maintain his cover. He hadn't planned how far he'd go, but he figured he would make sure the sneaky bastard went all the way home. If it had been Jeff spying on him and Denise the morning after their date, he wanted Jeff to know 2 could play that game, and Reuben was licensed to do it. The streets grew narrow and meandered upward, lined with large tract homes and various shades of boring beige. It made sense that Jeff would live in a place like this, since he was a veritable wolf in sheep's clothing. Reuben suspected his whole life was built on appearances and tethered by his strict control. The way he dressed, his house, his car, his wife. Where did the guy think Denise would fit into all that? As Reuben rounded a bend, the road climbed ahead, and Jeff's car disappeared behind the closing gate to a private street. Reuben passed the entrance and turned around, positioned his vehicle so he could watch the Audi pull into the driveway at the end of the cul-de-sac, and waited. It was dark, and the light from the garage illuminated the driveway. A minute later, a figure stepped out and walked to the curb where a mailbox stood. Cast in shadow, Jeff retrieved the mail, shuffling envelopes as he turned and faced the gate. Reuben sat behind the cloak of his darkened windows, making a silent stand. A warning. Come and get it, Reuben wanted to say, but stay away from Denise. He fidgeted with the gun at his side and mentally ticked off the list of weapons he had at home. Jeff put his hands in his pants pockets, and the 2 men had themselves a little standoff. Reuben began to feel punchy. This guy might have been slight of stature, but he had balls of steel. Reuben knew Jeff would stand there all night if he had to in order to prove a point. Minutes passed before Jeff took out his cell phone and held it, poised to place a call. Reuben took it as a sign Jeff had had enough, and he rolled down the hill back to the 101. The clock on the dashboard read 10:58, too late to bother Denise, no matter how badly he wanted to make sure they were square. He kept glancing at the phone perched on his dashboard, hoping to see Denise's name pop up. He pressed the screen button, but no messages were left, no calls missed. He'd have to spend one more night without her. He tried to pretend it didn't kill him inside. He snorted into the silence as he cruised down the 101. He didn't know how far he would take this thing with Denise. Surely it was just intense infatuation. Leah had told him he wasn't capable of love, and he was inclined to believe her because she wasn't the first to say that. What scared him even more was that Denise might feel the same way. It might be time to dunk his head in a bucket of cold reality and set himself straight. Sergeant Brian Carter was the only person Reuben trusted for advice. He'd been married his 2nd time around, for well over a decade. He made marriage seem easy, and for once Reuben was curious how he pulled it off. Tomorrow Reuben planned to be near the courthouse as he delivered evidence related to another case. When he got home, he'd shoot Carter a text to see if they could meet for lunch. The line at Nesto's Tacos spilled out the door, with black and blue suits scattered everywhere. Thank goodness Carter had arrived early and saved them a table. He was a friend of the owner by way of his former partner, Officer Veronica Rodriguez. Ruben stood in line while Sergeant Carter shouted over the noise from their table. "When you get to the front, tell them I want the Carter Special. They'll know what to do. You should get the same." Ruben nodded in acknowledgement and looked overhead at the menu. Smoked fish tacos, chicken mole tacos, short rib tacos. His mouth watered. He approached the counter and said, "2 Carter Specials, please." The man at the grill swiveled his head, scanning the dining room. With his chiseled features and thick dark hair, the guy looked like a model. Ruben watched as he tipped his head to Carter, then extended a hand to Ruben. "Hey, I'm Scott Oliva. Welcome to my taco joint." They shook hands. "Ruben Murray, nice to meet you." Scott said, "Did you say you want the Carter Special? It's spicy." Ruben said, "Yeah, if he can handle it, I'm game. Congrats on the nuptials, by the way. Officer Rodriguez is quite a catch." He remembered her as a fierce defender of justice with a heart of gold and a face to launch 1,000 ships. Scott said, "It's detective now, and yeah, I'm a lucky guy," he smirked. The cashier rang up Ruben's order and handed him the receipt. He signed the credit card slip, then weaved through the tables to where Carter was sitting. They slapped hands in an elaborate handshake, and Ruben leaned in for a bro hug. Ruben asked, "Is it me, or is he a bit young?" Carter's smile was wide and bright in contrast to his dark skin. "Now you know why she didn't go out with your old ass." He laughed, and Ruben scowled as he sat down across from him. Ruben said, "Don't hate me because I'm beautiful. And besides, 36 is the new 29 or some bullshit." Carter said, "You wish. Man, it's about time you paid your debt. I was beginning to think you forgot." The Warriors game they'd bet on was weeks ago, soon after he'd started investigating Denise's case. Leah wasn't the only relationship that had suffered from Ruben's absence, but Carter was the one who mattered the most. Ruben said, "Come on, man, don't bust my balls. How are Alicia and the kids?" Carter's wife was tall for a woman and just as fair with blonde hair and blue eyes. Carter said, "Good and good. Speaking of balls, you get that rash checked out yet?" Ruben shook his head. "Why don't you ask your wife?" Carter's eyes went wide and he tossed his head back. "Oh, you better watch yourself. Hey, Alicia's been asking about you, wondering why you haven't come around lately. She's got her suspicions about it, but I had to find out for myself. Is there something you need to confess?" Ruben frowned. "What? I've been busy." Carter said, "Busy, huh?" He sucked his teeth and tilted his head forward. "She says you're seeing someone. Like, really seeing someone." I was all, "Who, Ben? No way, man, no way. Never gonna happen." Ruben fought the urge to squirm in his seat. If he gave any reaction, or no reaction for that matter, Carter would pick it apart and break it down into cold hard facts. Ruben continued, "It's this case I've been working on. I told you about it a while ago." Carter said, "What's the client's name again? Shaffer? I figured you'd be done with that." Ruben said, "I am." Carter said, "Did you cash in?" Ruben said, "Yeah, he paid top dollar too, but I don't know. There's something about this guy I can't shake. He hired me to catch his wife cheating, but it was just a scheme. I'm almost sure he used me to go after his wife's friend Denise. I've got a bad feeling about it." Carter said, "What do you mean he used you to go after her?" Scott brought their trays out to them personally. "I put the scorching hot salsa on the side for you," he said to Ruben. "I don't want to have to call an ambulance. Enjoy." Ruben said, "Thanks," and shot Carter a dubious look. "Does Alicia know you eat like this when she's not around?" Carter said, "Hey, man, what she doesn't know." Ruben said, "We'll hurt you." During his stressful days as a cop, Ruben had learned firsthand that eating spicy food was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Carter had a good 15 years on Ruben. He said, "My people are from the South, brother. We drink Tabasco for breakfast. Now continue." Ruben said, "Where was I?" He pinched a taco and dipped the tip in the salsa. "Oh, yeah. So this guy Shaffer, when I didn't give him the details on his wife's girlfriend, he found her himself and made a pass at her, pretending he was someone else." He bit off the tip of the taco and his eyes widened from the heat. Carter said, "Good, right?" He smirked around a full mouth. "If his wife is still friends with this Denise, why doesn't she know what he looks like?" Ruben finished off the first taco and went for the next, deciding to stay away from the hot salsa. Ruben said, "He's one of those reclusive gaming types. You know, real antisocial. Spends all his time in the chat rooms, hidden behind a fake identity. Or I think they call them avatars. I checked out his Facebook account. His profile page is like a desert. No pictures of him on there. Even has a cat as his profile pic. His wife's page is clean too. Mostly pictures of her with her girlfriends and old stuff from back home in the Netherlands. No pictures of him there either, which is weird. I mean, everything about this guy is off. Carter kept his head down and his attention on the tacos, but Ruben knew his wheels were spinning. Carter asked, and he made a move on her, this Denise character? Ruben said, yeah, manipulated her into asking him out. They went on a date last night, but it ended badly. I'm thinking he'll leave her alone now, but he really threw me for a loop. Very straight-laced, kind of looked like Opie. You know that kid from that old show? Carter said, you mean the Andy Griffith show? I'm surprised you remember that. Ruben said, reruns, Carter. Geez, I didn't grow up under a rock. Carter said, uh-huh. His buddy had stopped chewing and was blinking hard at him. And how do you know he manipulated her? He wiped his mouth with a napkin. Oh, shit, Ruben thought. Ruben leaned in from her privacy, and Carter did the same. I was there. Carter said, there where? Ruben said, she's a real estate agent. He showed up at one of her showings, and Carter sat back in his seat but kept his voice low. Wait. I think I see where this is going. Have you made contact with the target? Ruben's mouth went dry. Of course his friend had zeroed in on the main stumbling block in the situation. He'd known this would come back to bite him from the moment he walked into Q's over a month ago. I know how it looks, Ruben said, but I was having a hard time breaking the case because Shaffer was lying from the jump. Nothing was adding up, and yeah, I made a drastic move to try to gain some movement in the case. Carter made a calming gesture with his hand. Slow your roll, partner. You know I've got your back, but I need to know the facts of the case if I'm going to help you. All of them. Now, how far has it gone between you two? Ruben asked. Who, Shaffer? Carter folded his arms across his big chest and glowered. Ruben inhaled another taco in 2 huge bites. He came here to talk about Denise, but he hadn't predicted that the time might be used for a confession of his own bad business practices. He said, okay, yeah, I've sort of been seeing her, but only officially after I settled the case. Now came the eye roll. Carter said, man, didn't I teach you better than that? Let me guess, she doesn't know you were investigating her, right? Ruben didn't have to say a word. Carter's gaze fixed on a point outside the window, and Ruben figured he was about to get his ass reamed. Carter said, man, I can't believe she was right. Once I tell Alicia, I'm never going to hear the end of it. When Carter faced him again, his expression sobered. You must have it bad to risk everything. You see that, don't you? Ruben's jaw clenched. Hearing his best friend state the obvious made it hit home. God bless him, Carter didn't do subtle. Ruben cleared his throat as emotion suddenly blocked his words. Yeah. He tried to smile and make light of the situation, but his mouth wasn't working properly. Fuck me, is this normal? I never felt like this before. The surprise was evident on his friend's face. He had worked many cases with Ruben and had trained him for a year as a rookie. Through life and death situations and nights spent together talking about personal things best left in a Catholic confessional, they had forged a permanent bond. Carter knew more about Ruben than anyone else in the world, including his shameful past, and how his mind worked. Carter frowned. You in love with this woman? Ruben couldn't bring himself to say the actual word. If Carter was right, it wasn't meant for his ears anyway. His chest tightened as he squeezed out a lie. No, man. I don't know. Carter shook his head. Wow. I never in a million years thought I would see this day. Weird, man. Weird. Ruben said, you act like I've been diagnosed with cancer. They both laughed and the tension crumbled. Carter said, I've got to meet this girl. When are you bringing her over for dinner? He went back to his tacos. Ruben said, it's way too early for that. Look, I'm out of my mind right now. I can't stop thinking about her, and we've only technically been on one date. One incredible date. I mean, you'd be straight with me if you thought I'd taken a jump off the deep end, right? Carter finished chewing and said, oh, you most definitely took a dive. See, this is why God created women, to keep us guys from getting too full of ourselves. If you're not emotionally castrated every time you're in her presence, she's not the one. Ruben sighed, relieved. So it is normal. Carter said, welcome to the club, brother. He picked up his last taco and said somberly, you know you're going to have to come clean about this whole investigation thing. There's one thing I've learned from women is that they always find out the truth. They're natural-born investigators. It's in their genes and then cultivated from birth. And you definitely want to be on the telling end of it, because if she finds out another way... He whistled and slashed across his neck with his thumb. Carter was speaking directly to Reuben's fears, and while Reuben knew that at some point the truth was going to have to come out, he first had to get them on solid relationship ground. And after becoming an expert at avoiding that very thing, he muttered a Hail Mary into his taco. All right, that's the end of chapter 18. Please stay tuned for the next chapter because things are really starting to heat up. And don't forget to like the button. And I mean, hit the like button. You can like the button, but please do hit the like button and the subscribe button as well as the little bell icon. And I will see you next time.